Hey there, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Bulls versus Bears, or as it's been the last couple of weeks, Bears, and Bears, even though we've been wrong about it. We went, our track record, gentlemen, as a crew is, not every time we go triple bear, it's usually a fairly bullish signal, unfortunately. I think we're 1 from 3. Although actually Kai went bullish last week, so congratulations, Kai.
He's retaken the lead. Well done, Kai.
And Kai, obviously, mate, sporting your beautiful NPC merch there, the beautiful jacket. They're for those of you who made heaps of money on the SpaceX IPO this week, they're only $500, cheap compared to what you've made. We're using the same valuation model as SpaceX investors to price the jackets. So look, we fell short of time last week, and we said we're going to go through the next mega IPOs. And look, I'm going to speak for myself here, but do my best to park my general dislike or immediate distrust of Sam Altman, and my fanboy nature when it comes to Anthropic. Sorry. So excuse me. But this week, look, we bounced back despite we had Kevin Walsh came in as new Fed chair this week. These are the major headlines. US and Iran signed their memorandum of understanding in what can only be described as the world's worst deal, unless you're Iran. In history, Trump surprised everyone by signing it on Wednesday. He just pulled it out of his back pocket at Versailles at the G7 meeting and just announced that he was signing it. He probably wanted oil prices to go down or the stock market to go up. I'm assuming. He probably got like an alert system. So if the stock market's down, quick, make it you've got 6 things you can say.
Pete,
look,
it's like
chip stock's up.
So Micron is a big one for me. I think it hit a new high again. So amazing.
Is at a record high as of last night. So look, it's been yet another just bulletproof week. SpaceX, had 2 decent days, got to 210 or thereabouts. And then it's just sort of drifted off. But there's only one thing I realized: there's only 4% of free float actually trading at the moment, and we'll cover in a minute when stuff starts to get released. But Lamb Research, one of Kai's recommendations, which we were, we've got Juneteenth, which is the it's something to do with celebrating. Not celebrating slavery. That's probably the worst way to put it. I don't know. In memorandum of, I don't really understand it. It's kind of a weird holiday. In terms of it's one of those woke ones that they just chucked on the calendar. And it's relatively new, and it's to do with paying respect to the slaves or something. So we're shut tonight. So there won't be any movement tonight, but
I thought it was Monday. It was shut.
Oh, is it Monday? Oh God.
Actually, is it tonight? I'm sorry. Apologies.
I'll have to fact check. I was pretty sure it was tonight. So, but it's not. It doesn't even make the calendar. There's no. It's like it's one of those ones that you kind of take or you don't. It's I think they needed to get rid of Columbus Day or something. And because, when they were going through that phase of ripping down statues of Confederates and stuff like that. Anyway, I digress. Oil stocks down. You can see on the right-hand side there. We had a recommendation on Chevron, which is probably around about here anyway. We're down about 6%. I'm very inclined to, because it's back to where it started before the war. And oil prices are still higher, so I would favour it to probably continue, bounce from here. It's all about the SOX. There's the Philadelphia Semiconductors Index. at record highs. So, Kai, I mean, look, there's a few names in there. Intel jumped as well because Trump forced Intel down Apple's throat because the government's a big buyer of that. Is a big owner of Intel, but it jumped I think 11% last night. But there's some pretty decent numbers there. But yeah, any thoughts generally, or you were talking earlier in the week about that memory shortage. Give us a bit of texture around that.
It's actually really interesting. Well, this is more from a practitioner's guide, right? So, I was looking up RAM sticks for servers, a couple of weeks ago, and basically,
as you do, like I do that most days, mate.
Of course. But it's crazy, like when you go on eBay and things like that, if you bought a old server, one of these big boxes, and it was probably like a couple $1,000, but if you wanted the same spec RAMs, it was almost the same price to buy the RAM stick. So basically, they're giving away everything else in that server. It's only the RAM sticks that is pretty much valuable. Everything else is pretty much worthless. So, it speaks a lot because it's quite interesting because. The supply shortage will probably continue for another 2 years or so. So it's still severely constrained on the supply side, and there's no quick fix for it, and that's why all these memory chip stocks are still incredibly high, especially say Micron over the last week going 25%. But I think just in general that demand for server side compute is still very, very high, and I mean. I don't think it's slowing down anytime soon, going off Anthropic's usage rate. And we were talking about this last week, where they're profitable now, right? So like in terms of what their revenue is compared to expectations.
Anthropic is.
Yeah, Anthropic is, and Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, we'll get to it later, but OpenAI, it's a slightly different matter. But go on. Sorry.
No, absolutely. I think there is you have to distinguish between who is succeeding in the field and who is not. So I think, as a summary, I think obviously Anthropic's done incredibly well. Google's still in the race. OpenAI, it's actually still in the mix. However, I don't think it's got the take up for Anthropic as much as Anthropic does, and especially in the enterprise space, right? So I think just even with the pricing model, like from a user's perspective, you can see how I mean, OpenAI should have charged a more commanding stake in enterprise because they had the first lead advantage, but with Anthropic, I think they've monetized it much better. The base LLM models, to be honest, it's like you have to distinguish between what's the calculation engine, the LLMs, and what's the additional things on top, right? So with Claude, you can see that it does a really good job putting it all together. But I really think that LLM, the large language model race, is coming towards a space where it's plateauing because with the current technology that we have, they're all about the same, right? So if you use in chat just Claude versus OpenAI versus Gemini versus whoever, even the Chinese models, right? They give a very good answer with respect to what you ask. So I think that layer of competition is really narrowing. The big loser actually is Meta. So I think Meta's very far behind. They want to be in that space, but I think Zuck's really
and
bungled.
loads of very expensive stuff.
Yeah, well, exactly. He's throwing money at it, but I think they're really far behind in the race because it's quite surprising for Meta because they should be they should be one of the natural top leaders because they've got all the compute. They're not reliant on say for example Anthropic. They're in partnerships with AWS and who was the other provider? I think it was Google that has a shareholding in Anthropic as well.
Google and AWS own a massive chunk.
That's right.
So
that sorts their compute problem out. But you think these larger players with natural resources, from a compute standpoint, they should be out in the lead. But I think that race is really closing. But a special shout out to Perplexity. I think for where we are in ages.
Well, sorry, and we had this discussion today because I'm a junior dev. We had to explain to JT what an orchestrator was, and so and JT being the older statesman, me being a young buck junior developer. Basically, when I say I'm a junior developer, it just means I've got my prompts right now, and it does all the coding for us. But that orchestrating space is fantastic because it'll pick a model that suits the job, which is kind of what we do manually here, and it does produce really good results. And then pre-built skills like finance skills and Perplexity are brilliant as well. One interesting point back to your Meta, apparently a lot of what they've been doing with their guys that they've hired, etc., has been around optimizing their advertising through AI, which has been increasing their margins on their advertising because they're able to sell more targeted and better performing ads, and then they're getting people to pay more. And look, which I agree with that concept because I'd rather get 10 quality leads than 100 okay ones. You know what I mean? Like it's but that was an interesting point because I did the US version or the international version of the call this week, and I kept on sitting there going, "Oh, mate!" Basically, I was regurgitating half of what Kai sort of said in probably very poor language. I just sat there the whole time going, "Yeah, I think Kai should do this show next time," because you were sitting here explaining stuff to me, and I had to go onto TV and explain it to everyone else. Which was not exactly ideal, but yeah, like I tend to agree. Like I was burning loads of tokens with Claude, for quite a lot now, but now I've got a lot of the dashboards and everything set up. Like I'm not using that anymore. Like I haven't hit session limit in weeks. But in that setup phase, I was hitting session limit on 2 terminals like 3 times a day. And it just like, I think that once people get through and start to refine and build their reusable stuff, but apparently Uber burnt through a year's tokens budget in under 4 months. And I can't imagine what Uber's total tokens thing was. And apparently there was rumors of some other company that didn't set a limit and burnt like $1 million, and like some idiot set a massive project up and pretty much just like ended up with $1 million bloody bill on something that was directly plugged in with no spend limit, etc. But I mean, like even like back to the memory thing as well, like that shortage now. The SK Hynix came out with a new HBM this week, a new thing that's more power efficient and is more efficient. But they won't obviously get that out for a little bit. And like so there is, and then Google's using the inference chips, which are the fit for purpose. So I tend to agree with your point, Kai. Like the actual LLMs stuff's like is kind of it's kind of winding down. There's Mistral AI, which hasn't been released in the EU, but is apparently 50% better than Claude. The Claude Mythos, the new version, it's been benchmarked against it, and it showed a 52% better reasoning than supposedly. I can only go off the charts on the internet, which were probably produced by Mistral AI, and then China released a model this week that's better than Mythos, and then they're running around going, foreign nationals can't use Fable. Like it, it's. I think that it's. I mean, at what point do you is it? It's probably too much already, right? Like you don't need a PhD level
diminishing returns, right? Because you know what I mean. For most of the use case, like this is pretty nerdy, but like, what was I doing the other day? I was doing some proofs on relativity, so like a bit of physics, because it was with the whole space theme that was going about. I was revisiting my my high school physics. But like when you go into that space, that might be more.
Folks, we're coming up with a new form of technical analysis that Kai's doing. It's all physics based. It's yeah, no.
So Kai, so you're saying that. So Kai, earlier in the week, you were calculating and buying RAM, and then you were going back and doing some high school physics. Great social life there, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
and also, how much money are we spending on your physics streams?
Hey, I've actually. Oh, this is real. This is real nerdy. I was reading up all about black holes and stuff like that. I was like, we're going on the moon, we're going to Mars, and then I was like, okay, what's the next frontier? Black holes. I'll save some time. I won't spare you my theories on black holes and all that.
Save it for the conspiracy episode.
Yeah. This is gonna be good. I did this whole paper on it, and it was like, oh my god, I don't know how I got stuck in this loop, but anyways, like, yes, I've had some pretty wild thoughts on physics.
But well, I mean, look, of all the episodes to have, wild thoughts on physics. Well, this is not. I mean, digging. Half of this is digging a hole, and the other half's mortgages. So we can probably just skip through the Australian bit. There's no real. I mean, there's South 32's down, but I mean, if the ASX heat map was an emoji, it'd be the meh emoji. So we'll just move on to more interesting things. But Nikkei today, JT said 70,000 for the first time.
Oh no, I just it probably cracked it 1 or 2 days ago, but obviously haven't kept it on.
New record high today.
Oh, there you go. But it's at 70, nearly 72 now, but it cracked 70 earlier in the week. And I was just like, wow, I just remember it being stuck around the 30s and 40s for a very, very long time. And here we are at 70s now. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been on a tear. And obviously the NASDAQ, albeit only up around about 3% for the week, it's like that, it's still got sort of strong sells, but we just had that SpaceX has lifted the mood, and then as well, and they do say this is not physics or science. This is just absolute anecdotal hearsay from me. But there's always that theory that around periods like the Olympics or World Cups and stuff, the mood's generally a little bit better, and summer in the US is a bit better. So we had the World Cup, the Knicks winning the basketball for the first time in 56 years, which is the home of the stock market, and then the SpaceX IPO went pretty well, and everyone was just like, "We're going to mine asteroids!" Like, the total addressable market is like 1,000 trillion, and I'm like, no, that's not technically possible. And if it is, it's like 25 years away. So like it just got this major boost, and then Trump's jumped on the back of it and gone, oh yeah, and then he's given away $300 billion to rebuild Iran. He has unfrozen all the assets that they've worked so hard for 20 years to keep frozen. And then apparently at the end of the 60-day, so if Israel fires at Lebanon, that's a break of the deal. So Israel's got its head, so they managed to get Israel's hands tied, and they can start charging tolls to go through Hormuz after the 60 days. So Iran, that's a pretty good win. That's a pretty damn good win, I would have thought, because like back in February they had none of that, and they were. But now they've managed to get their assets unfrozen, and there's all these jokes floating around the internet. It's like that basically there's now people queuing up to go to war with the US because they figured they'll just end up with a handout. He might give back the east coast of the US. He might give it back to Britain.
That's true, but you need to control a choke point though. That's the key. That's so Iran had the strait, so you need some sort of natural choke point to be able to negotiate. But well done to Iran.
Apparently Greenland put up their hand and they went, invaders, come in. So they've at least got minerals. So it was a pretty good performance sort of overall, considering we had a very hawkish Fed and a new Fed chair that was basically, you just said, we're going to combat inflation. So rate hikes are expected by October now. And we got a hawkish Fed, and the votes were because it is, the chair doesn't control the Fed. And old Powell's still on there, but apparently he's going to set up 5 task forces. One of them handling communication. He was very, very short in the press conference. He didn't even want to do it, apparently. And he just said that they should stop giving guidance. So it was like, which was a bit interesting. But basically on the basis that the guidance has been so crap that they should stop doing it, which doesn't fill me with confidence. But yeah, so despite higher inflation and everyone, that's just been written off now as transient. And higher rates apparently doesn't matter. SpaceX this week then went on to, after that, they upped the offer in the IPO to 85 billion from 75. Then they immediately exercised an option in Cursor, which I'm going to get Kai to talk about because he's a fanboy. So Cursor's like I should know as a junior dev, is a vibe coding. It's a coding app, which apparently everyone I know who's done developing or whatever drools over it. You reckon it's that good? So they immediately paid 60 billion for that, straight up, like second day of being open. So, but yeah, tell us what Cursor is, Kai, instead of me butchering it.
Well, Cursor started a couple years.
I know. There you go.
Cursor started a couple years ago. A group of very young entrepreneurs, right? And basically,
24-year-old billionaires this week.
Yes, exactly.
They're from MIT.
Extremely
They're
young.
25 or.
Yeah, brilliant though, right? Like, because traditionally VS Code, which is released by Microsoft, so Visual Studios is the main tool that most developers in pre-AI, they used to use this tool, and it was really good. But the frustration is basically like, a lot of times you spend a lot of time manually typing out things. The conception of Cursor was basically that it should be more intuitive for developers, where if you're writing a lot of boilerplate code or things that are not really pushing the project forward and it's just manual work, try to eliminate that, right? So basically it started off this whole tangent, and basically it launched with AI in that, right? But the reason why it's so much better, like, I know a lot of people use like Claude or Grok Build or whoever's released these agentic code platforms, Codex from OpenAI as well. But really, it's not as elegant as Cursor, because what happens is, like, they have a really good indexing algorithm behind the scenes. So you can work on massive projects, and it's actually surprisingly really efficient in terms of how it codes. Whereas if you go to Claude Code, that contextual memory, it's not as efficient in terms of how Cursor does it, right? So from a development standpoint, Cursor is definitely the best tool that I've used, and I think Elon sees
Grok had
well,
Grok Build, right, which was still pretty good, and then Elon's gone, well, because SpaceX has got XAI in it. To go and just fork out $160 billion and to essentially bring it all across in all stock, by the way, which JT found out the other day, which makes me a little bit suspicious about this IPO even more, because it's like he obviously had some trigger in there, and we were right about the high on the first night. It went exactly to where the employees were allowed to sell their shares, and I think it busted through by 0.5% maybe, and then it was but then come Monday it just kept on going. So this is the so Q2 earnings, and then Q2 plus performance shares. So basically, it's 20% gets unlocked. It's about 5 or 6% unlocked, and then I think above that 30% mark, up to 20% can go, and then it's kind of 7% can be unlocked, every 10 to 30 days, or on average. Elon can't sell for the first year, but basically everything except for Elon is ready to go. Is available to be able to be sold within 6 months, and it really does start to ratchet up. the further, and then NASDAQ's not going to July 6th and 7th. It'll get included in the NASDAQ, which is not, there's been a lot of people talking about it being instantaneously put in there. That is complete bullshit. Like that's, that it doesn't go in until after the 4th of July weekend. Over that weekend, Starship Flight 13 is, is going to be, it's a test launch. I am going to go out on a limb and say that if, I reckon they may delay that Starship Flight, because imagine if it blew up and then, all of a sudden you're pretty messy day and you're a NASDAQ inclusion. And then the unlocks are, the unlocks and then August and November. So that Starship Flight's pretty important. Like they've had a successful test of components. But if that does a blue origin, oh my Lord, this market is in for an interesting period, I would imagine. There'll be no amount of space asteroid mining theories on Twitter are going to save it if Starship blows up, because it's basically that's what makes all of the stuff Elon's talking about possible. So yeah, look, good luck to them. I won't be putting in a bid till $80. I've got to say, but I got to say I'm enjoying watching how enthusiastic people are about it, and as long as they're not asking me my opinion on whether they should sell it or not, and how much they should put on. it's not a big deal. But and then it won't be in the S&P for 6 months, if that, and then it's still subject to approval. So and that they are the biggest ETFs, the S&P ETFs.
So one thing I do remember, so back in probably 17, 18, so that was when Tesla was trading probably a couple $100. So before splits and moves like that. That's when the actual production Teslas, I forget the Model S, the first ones were coming out, and it was just amazing how polarizing Elon was with the first Teslas. And we had I was working with some traders and at the time who were big car guys, and they were just like, look, electric stupid, and just they wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. But one of the guys actually had a side bet on whether Tesla gets to 500 first or 100, the shorter one. But it's just amazing how here we are, roughly call it 10 years later, and Elon's done it again. And here we have the next thing, space, and we have a lot of fanboys, and it brought a lot of excitement into the market. Should I buy SpaceX? Should I sell SpaceX? And then you've got the traditional guys just saying that, man, I can't believe that this company's worth $3 trillion. I think at the peak it hit $3 trillion. So I'm not saying that on either side, but it's just amazing that Elon's done it again, and he's done it now with rockets.
Well, he's a trillionaire, so on paper, and I don't think he really mentioned. I think even he knows it's probably not going to be for long. But overall, look, I'm excited about it. I'm just probably 3 to 4 years away from being investing excited about it. Unless it gets down to some sort of reasonable valuation. But they straight away did 20 billion worth of debt, which also concerns me. I mean, how do you raise 85 bill, and then need another 20 in the first week, which was rated as corporate grade. I'm not entirely sure how, but it's a lot more than their revenue. But we're going to cover OpenAI and Anthropic now. Mm-hmm. So just this thing's gone from, it's 30x essentially in what's 3 years. And that's, and it is the most used platform on the planet. 11% of the globe have an OpenAI account or have signed up. So and it's like it's in the vernacular, right? Like it's you know, I GPT'd it, like it so in, you know, Claude not as popular. Particularly, it's funny because we talk about it all day, and you know, here at work, and then you turn around to someone and go, "Oh, I chucked it into Claude," and then you get some confused looks from the older generation, and you go, "Oh, GPT," and they're like, "Oh," and then they kind of get it. They a few people genuinely think that that's that GPT is the only one out there, but they just did a recent round a couple of months ago, 122 billion they raised in a private funding round. But and then apparently SoftBank's tried to get them some debt, and the banks have said no. And this is why 14 billion in losses in 2026 on top of, so I think they're running at about 36 billion in losses at the moment. And well, they reckon they might be cash flow positive by 2029. But, you know, like I said, 11% of the planet every week, 900 million weekly active users, wow, I didn't know that, 2.5 billion prompts a day. You know, I'm only 500 million of them on Claude. And then, but this is where, I mean, obviously there's a bit of a stench around them at the moment, but this is what I was really surprised about. And I guess why everyone's still, you know, on board is like 92% of Fortune 500 use GPTs. So the new model's pretty good. We didn't really use it here at all because we didn't like it. But I found that like the new 5.5 is pretty decent.
It's good.
It does
It's
certain
really
things
good.
really well.
Yeah.
And there's been a bit of an upgrade, but and then like and sort of like they all just, like, we've said this before, they just leapfrog each other, right? Like Grok didn't really announce too much of an upgrade. But I've been going back to Grok a little bit lately because it's just lightning fast. And now, like that jump up that we had in co-work and Claude, etc. Claude feels really slow all of a sudden. But I mean, it just be the infrastructure that OpenAI is committed to build out is their problem, and their own CFO said if they don't essentially like double in very short periods on a continual basis, they're not going to be able to meet their signed commitments. So, and this is kind of why, is because, well, and I put the slides in the wrong order, is that OpenAI market share back in 2023 was 50%, Anthropic was 27%. Anthropic was 12%, and now OpenAI is back to 27%, and Anthropic's up to 40%. And look at the lead they've got in business adoption and share of revenue, you know, enterprise share of revenue and things like that. So it, you know, Anthropic's really starting to kill them at that end where, and they're ex OpenAI, aren't they, Kai? Like they're, yeah, they weren't particularly.
They're all ex OpenAI guys.
It's a brother and sister apparently.
I've got a question for you, Mark. So if you were offered some Anthropic pre-IPO, would you get some?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. If I was offered OpenAI, I would recommend them to my ex-wife. So you put it in those terms. But yeah, so no, I don't, and SpaceX is in the middle. In terms of I probably wouldn't offer it to my ex-wife because I think SpaceX will eventually go all right. So yeah, but yeah, Anthropic just seems to me like, I don't know, they're just easier to like as well. Like they've all of the founders have committed to the 80% of their net wealth going to chat, like the Buffett thing or whatever, that prosperity project or whatever it's called. They're big on ethics. They don't take contracts. You know, the White House tried to scare them, and the Pentagon, and they just didn't care. Like, and they maintain their values, etc. I think they've been pretty tricky in terms of, you know, how powerful their AI is very conveniently leaked to the press just before they've got a cap raise. But You know, I mean, that's not
That's the whole reason why they started Anthropic, right? So it was and that was the cause of the break. So basically, and that's why I'm a little bit suspicious of Sam Altman as well, because like there's so much internal politics where it's like it's been voted that he's been irresponsible. Basically, yeah, the starting point of Anthropic was like ex OpenAI people leaving because they disagreed with the approach on how AI in the long term will interact with humans. Yeah, exactly. So there's this whole backstory, and I remember the time when
there's there's definitely some bitter gossip in there as well. And like Anthropic means for humanity, essentially. Comes from the derived from the Greek word anthropos, meaning human being. But yeah, so look, I don't know. They're easier to like. They're doing the right thing. They're net profitable. Whereas I just feel like there's just been a couple of comments from Sam Altman like, we're not doing our job if we're not burning 20 billion a year, like, and stuff like that. And I'm like, do I want to be a shareholder in a company that guy's running and saying stuff like that? Like, that's just immediate like alarm bells, right? Like, and then when he got a little like, someone questioned him at a press conference and he blew up, and I'm like, well, it's sort of look. I'm believe me, I'm no stranger to blowing up. But you don't do it. You don't do it being make yourself look like a petulant child when you're asking people for hundreds of billions of dollars. It's and like this run rate is out of control. Like they've it's like was 1 billion, then all of a sudden end of 2025 9 billion, and then like this is December, people, and then by May we're looking at 47. So it's 5x in 5 months in terms of like run rate, and they were saying that they would be hopeful for 11 billion by the end of 2026. Well, they got to that they got to that by February. So Salesforce, it says here, took 20 years to reach 30 billion in revenue. Anthropic just did it in 22 months. So yeah, it's it's pretty impressive. I mean, I got to say that it's the guy who's the mad genius behind it. The sister apparently runs the company, and he just sort of does his own thing. His comments about like the labor force is screwed, things like that, I think he's a little bit out of order on, but I don't think he's far from the point, but I just think he could probably just tone it down a little bit. Because if he scares people off, like they're going to get regulated to hell. So there's nothing the Europeans can't slow down.
Well, that was actually one of the articles I was reading, is that the fact that the federal government actually blocked the release of a couple of their models. So now investors are like, hang on, these guys are developing these great models, and now we have to contend with the government regulating it into, and you said it could be the European government next slowing it down. So
yeah, it's US government too.
Exactly. So usually the US is all gung ho. Yeah, let's go for it. And now China's looking a little bit more capitalist. just go, yeah, no, he's a free model player.
They didn't ban it. They just banned the use of it from non-US citizens. But they don't have your citizenship data on the platform, so they just had to pull it. But they even found that they had non-US citizen employees at Anthropic. They've got to go and leave. They're not allowed to. Like, they built it, for God's sake. I'm pretty sure that it's a pretty stupid rule. And particularly when that European one, which is still sandboxed, and I'm not sure what the story is behind that. Do you know anything about Mystic AI, Kai? What was that?
Talking about Mistral AI.
Yeah.
Mistral,
Yes.
yeah, it's a French, it's a French-run company. So they were actually in the game quite early on, right? So they were going more down the open source route, and their models are actually fairly competitive. I would say, I'm not too sure in terms of the latest stats that they released on how they're 50% better than Fable. I'm somehow discrediting that, because it's happened before on those LLM rankings, right? So it's like Meta was most famous
It was a
for doing that.
particular, and it was a particular reasoning, I've got to say, but
Yeah,
it wasn't a broad platform thing.
yeah.
But it was legit. Like, I went. It was on Twitter. I went because one of the beauty of AI is like on Twitter you can go in the comments and put @Grok and you go verify, and Grok and it said it does. Hilariously, I asked Grok, obviously, which is part of SpaceX, whether SpaceX was overvalued, and it said yes. So just not exactly looking after itself there, but yeah, no, but it was really interesting that it wasn't. I've got to go and do a little more digging, but it wasn't. It's not publicly available apparently. The system. So, and then the Chinese one as well was like it was a broader score, but no one. There's just so much paranoia about people. Like no. Everyone knows, like, oh no, I wouldn't use the Chinese ones. They're collecting my data as they scroll through TikTok, and you kind of go, oh god.
So is all the other LLMs, right? Like the thing is,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's happening with all of them. As soon as you disclose that information on chat, like, well, I think obviously the data is available on big scale, but I don't know. It's a black box.
It's a black box somewhere. Obviously, yeah, rising interest rates and the reopening of Hormuz, or the not good for crude, and not particularly good. The rising interest rates not good for precious metals. I don't think. I think I might be parking my Team Silver t-shirt for maybe for a couple of months. I mean, I'm of the opinion that we'll like the inflation will do the Fed's job for them in terms of dampening the economy. But I'm in the minority camp there. But uranium, there's been some stories around uranium this week, and it's managed to buck the trend overall. So, and I'm not, and I've been pretty distracted with other things, but yeah, it's been on a little bit of a run in global markets. And I will attempt to try and find out, maybe for the morning call or something over the next couple of days what's sort of going on there, because there's no major news or obvious announcements, but maybe it might be something to do with G7. It is in France, and the French are very big advocates of nuclear power, considering they're basically the power plant for the whole of Europe. Those idiots that did all the renewables, and they're all running on French nuclear power now, apparently. Spain and Portugal and Germany at times. So, it was a pretty good move. But is there anything you noticed, JT, in commodities this week?
No, I haven't been following it as closely, but one commodity I will talk about, and I talked about it on the trade this week, and I'll talk about it on the call on Monday, is HPA. So high purity alumina. So I've got a couple of clients into a trade with AEM, and the other producer is A4N, and it's worth, I think it's about 5 times as expensive. So I'm buying the cheap one, trying to play the catch-up game there. So that's the commodity that I was looking at this week.
What was that bloke we were talking to, Kai, at that thing? It wasn't alumina, was it? It was
No, it was it was HPA, so it was high purity.
Oh, it was
alumina.
HPA.
Oh, it was
okay.
HPA. It was HPA. So it was this operation out of Western Australia. So apparently they were able to extract it out of the brine in some of these salt
the salt lakes.
lakes.
So it wasn't.
Then,
so they're getting it actually out was like literally scraping the ground. It wasn't even mining. It was like a bulldozer. And the bloke was hilarious because it's like it looks like a white powder basically. And he said, I didn't know what the crowd would be like. He said, but those mining conferences get pretty boring. So sometimes I hold up a big Ziploc bag of this stuff and go, It's one way to start a party, and like he jiggles it around, and everyone giggles, and he goes, but apparently he got pulled up at the airport with it, and that joke kind of died. And he's like, it's HPA, and they're like, whatever, buddy.
The company was IPT, so Impact Minerals.
Okay, yeah. Which used to do a bunch of other fringe stuff.
Okay. And the key there is that apparently they're going to start using it in chips. It's a better cooling, or has better thermal properties than silica itself. So
it does. It does.
Yeah. So basically, that's the next use for it.
And there's a scale. We had a whole pyramid that it was a long. I can't believe I'm remembering this stuff. But there's a sort of it's like a 1 to 5 scale, and apparently like the sort of second top grade and the higher up at the mid grade is like the optimum price for how much of a pain in the ass it is to actually refine it. And the refining processes is really important as well. That's why, because he was talking about that, the A4N or whatever it is. So we'll go and dig that up. Maybe we'll talk about HPA next week, and other fringe materials. But the cooling stats were obviously, it was, but I don't think it could be used for high grade chips, could it, Kai? Like, unless you used like the top grade stuff, which was like it became like cost effective.
No, I think it was they used it for solar panel, and I remember he was talking about they used it to build a lot of solar panels and electricity. I remember he was talking about data centers.
There was
connectivity
the chips thing. There was, and I think it was talking about inference chips. But anyway, obviously we haven't researched that very well, and JT's blindsided us with that one. So we're looking like a bunch of old men now. So next week, there is a bit of data in Australia. We got CPI on the Wednesday, and we got employment on the Thursday. For you spice lovers out there, we've got McCormick and Co on Wednesday. Micron on Thursday.
Oh, there you go.
I was unaware of that. I didn't realize I was that late in the game. Because we're back into earnings season. Second week of July. It's like the never-ending story. And it doesn't. Final GDP doesn't do anything because it's the third revision. The US has basically got nothing there. We have a couple of manufacturing, and for the cruise ship lovers, there's Carnival and FedEx. But I dare say won't be too much next week. Juneteenth is tonight. It is closed tonight. Okay. So, it won't be the end of month. It'll be the end of month on the Monday, I suppose, on the 30th of June, which will be end of financial year. So for all of those people out there that need to do their end of financial year movements or selling or whatever they need to do and move stuff into their super, make sure you call your accountant maybe Monday, get that organised. And a whole bunch of alerts went off in my calendar this week, and I had to remind people. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us and providing your insights. We'll
thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for if you've stuck in this far, we really appreciate it. We'll speak next week.